Set for another edition of Miami Hurricanes Live. We got Paul Scoop on the U here. You can catch him on YouTube right here. Just search it, Paul Scoop on the U, to talk Canes. Paul, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Mark. Thank you so much for having me on your show again. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And, of course, now we're in for a long off season. I tell sports fans this all the time. Being college football fans, it is the longest off season of any sport anywhere. If you're an NBA fan, Major League Baseball fan, you wait a couple months, boom, you're playing games again. But in college football, you're done at the end of December, and we're not going to see you till September. So much to talk about, though, concerning personnel moves, personnel changes, and, of course, coaching staffs are constantly in flux. And I certainly want to hit you up later in the show on your evaluation of the team's play in the Cheez-It Bowl against Oklahoma State. But we've got a number of news headlines that are much more pertinent right now, starting with your co-defensive coordinator in EPHRAIM BANDA moving on to Utah State. I got to say, Paul, that as soon as I saw that news, I thought that he may have gained the head coaching position out there, but he was certainly earning that position. And a couple of things that I read, more the allure of being able to be the defensive coordinator and calling all the shots there for Utah State.
Yeah, definitely. Coach Banda will join Blake Anderson and his staff down at Utah State. First-year head coach down at Utah State. He'll be the defensive coordinator. He's also taking some part-time coaches with him to Utah State. DeMarcus Van Dyke, who was a director of player recruiting with Coach Cooney at the University of Miami. He was a big factor in recruiting. Local guy, went to Monsignor Pace High School, went to the University of Miami. I think he was a third-round pick to the Oakland Raiders as well, played in the NFL. So he'll be joining his staff. So will quality control analyst Mike Zuckerman and defensive director of player personnel Alex Devine as well. So definitely a big jump. The question is for Miami, who will take over as the safeties position coach moving forward? A couple names have already came out that Miami may be pursuing. Nick Monroe, Syracuse safeties coach, who has strong ties specifically in the North Miami area. Also, Corey Bell, defensive backs coach at UCF. He comes from the Randy Shannon kind of coaching lineage. He's followed Randy Shannon for a very long time at Florida, at UCF. So a couple interesting names to look out for. I'm sure those are just two quick names. There's going to be a lot more coaches under consideration to take over at the safeties position coach role. I don't think Ed Reed wants the job. I know a lot of fans scream, Ed Reed, perfect fit, obviously one of the best safeties to ever play the game. But ultimately, I don't think he's interested in taking that job.
Yeah, Ed Reed certainly making his presence known and felt in the program, being that bridge between the players and the administration, and doing a fine job, and seems to make a big impact in what he has done here in the last season. Considering the ridicule and the criticism directed toward Blake Baker as defensive coordinator this particular season, with the Canes finishing with a much better record than they have in recent years, but the defensive side of the ball not being what it has been in terms of national rankings. Do you have any thoughts about Blake Baker's performance, and if there is a possible change? You would have thought it would have already been forthcoming at this point.
You're as good as your last at bat, Mark. Blake Baker finished the season ending the last two games, giving up 99 points, 1,196 total yards of offense the past two games. We've allowed 233 passing yards per game this entire season, 174 rushing yards per game. We've given up 4.5 yards per carry. Look, Blake Baker, ultimately, I believe he will be retained on staff. Unfortunately, I don't know if the word in shock if he is fired. I just think I would be surprised if he was let go. I don't think Manny Diaz is going to get rid of Blake Baker. An interesting scenario I can see play out, Mark. There's a guy by the name of Charlie Patridge. if you're familiar with his name, he was the defensive line coach at Pittsburgh currently. He was also the associate head coach there under Pat Narduzzi this past season. He was the co-defensive coordinator under Brett Bielema's staff at Arkansas. He then, and previously at Wisconsin as well. After that, he gets the head coaching job at Florida Atlantic University for 3 years. Literally goes 3-9 every single season. Don't be surprised if Manny hires Charlie Patridge as the defensive line coach and as co-defensive coordinator. Remember, Todd Stroud, defensive line coach, he has a past history of a medical illness, very serious issue, and the COVID-19 season has taken a humongous toll on him and his health, obviously, he has to be very cautious of what's going on, being around practice, players, traveling. He's definitely someone who needs to be very careful. He may retire or take another role, step away from the defensive line position, and they may bring in Charlie Patridge. That's a name to look out for moving forward. So I can see a scenario where Blake Baker, in a sense, just instead of taking the defensive coordinator role as the head guy, goes back to co-DC and then bringing in another co-DC in Charlie Patridge, for example. But that's just one name, one situation. But ultimately, Mark, at any other program, Blake Baker would be gone after UNC. End of story. We've seen this at Texas with Tom Herman as their head coach. I believe they went 7-3. Could be wrong on that. Mm-hmm. They got rid of him. They bring in Steve Sarkisian. Great hire. Alabama offensive coordinator, just killing it over there down in Tuscaloosa. Now they're looking at guys like Marcus Freeman. They want to win football games. They want to put down the money to bring in the right personnel to get the job done. Manny Diaz wants to be successful at Miami. You need to let go of your pupils, of the guys you brought in. You can't have a heart in college football. You need to be cold. You need to be real. And Blake Baker does not deserve a job next season.
Yeah, I think he laid it out there very succinctly and very directly that this is not an intramural team. This is not a situation where you bring your buddies on to have a good time and then move on and have a few drinks after the games.
Right.
Certainly, if your buddies are some of the best in the business and that works out, great. But that should be a bonus. And I think Mark Richt's tenure was the perfect example of mixing family and business and not doing it effectively. And I'll never understand that. And Manny Diaz may be falling prey to it as well. It's a defense that certainly performed among the top 10 to 15 in the nation for 3 to 4 years there at the end of Mark Richt's tenure, with Manny Diaz running the defense, and then certainly took steps in the other direction this year.
Yeah. And another example people are bringing up, Mark, is Al Golden with Mark D'Onofrio. Al Golden was the head coach. That was his good friend from Temple. I think I could be wrong if they both went to Penn State together. Could be wrong on that. Mark D'Onofrio was actually a third-round draft pick, was a very successful college football player, becomes defensive coordinator, and Al Golden just couldn't get rid of him whatsoever. Could not get rid of him, would vouch for his buddy, and Al Golden actually got fired technically before Mark D'Onofrio. That's the funny thing. So, yeah, if you want to succeed in this game, you have to fire your close friends.
Now, do you have any issue with Manny Diaz being retained as the head coach?
If Manny Diaz, pride comes before the fall, Mark. If Manny Diaz can drop his pride, fire Blake Baker, get rid of the defensive staff, bring in new guys that have a different defensive philosophy than Manny Diaz, that will challenge Manny Diaz and his defensive philosophy, because he cannot tolerate a yes man. I mean, he only tolerates yes man is where I'm going. Manny Diaz doesn't want people challenging him, but if he can just drop his pride and just bring in a new defensive coordinator and literally he can kill it at Miami. I really think he could do a good job, but if Manny Diaz, if he can't get rid of Blake Baker, man, I'm sorry. My patience is up. It's going to be year 3 we're going into. You have a tough non-conference. You have Alabama, App State, Michigan State. I'm sorry. And the whole transfer portal, relying on it, we need to develop our own guys at one point. It's a good bridge at times, but you can't rely on it every single year. I just hope Manny Diaz realizes that, and you need to start developing your guys in your recruiting classes as well. So ultimately, Manny, he's made a lot of bad decisions. He hired Dan Enos, fired that whole offensive staff. That was on Manny. He brought in Blake Baker. No one else brought in Blake Baker. That was Manny Diaz. He could have picked anyone else if he wanted to. Those are decisions on Coach Manny Diaz. Bad decisions. First-year head coach. Ultimately, I don't even think Manny Diaz should have even been the head coach at Miami. But, hey, he's our guy, and we'll see what happens moving forward.
You bring up a great case about the transfer portal, which has become college football's version of NFL free agency.
Yeah.
And top-notch NFL teams, even that being a full-fledged business, aren't built on free agents. They're built through the draft because you bring those guys in, you develop them, they become part of the culture, they become the base, the foundation, and then you add complementary pieces through free agency that are fits both from a football on the field standpoint and also culturally as a standpoint, that they're either just not going to detract from the culture or they're going to add to it as leaders. And if you're just relying on the transfer portal from a talent perspective, it's not going to work. Right. But it's additionally not going to work from the standpoint of just having guys come in from all sorts of different programs. You don't know what they've been taught, how they've been developed, and just bringing them in and trying to attach them onto your team. That is not the way to go. There's no question about that. And the transfer portal has to be used effectively. It's here to stay and is being used more than it ever has. Over 500 players currently in the transfer portal. So you can't ignore it. You want to take advantage of it, but it's for 2, 3, 4 complementary additions to the roster. No doubt about that. And Paul, something you said there also brought to mind a few conversations I got into over the last couple of weeks in trying to evaluate this Miami team and the current state of the program versus where we were at this point last year. So the easy look to say 6-6 with a bowl loss, 6-7 last year, losses to Georgia Tech and FIU and Duke, and then you transition to, the North Carolina game was bad and you wanted to win a bowl game, but 8-3 is a significant improvement in terms of record. But the pessimist, or maybe the realist in me, says, is that really a program upgrade? Better quarterback play than you had in 2017, 18, and 19. Significantly better quarterback play. Just a kicker who's going to make the kicks. So you went from having one of the worst field goal kicking situations in the nation to one of the best. And then just having a capable, if not top-notch, offensive coordinator to replace Dan Enos. So is really the program any better, or did you just make 3 good additions that really shored up 3 key areas? And so it's not necessarily a program upgrade. It just happens to be that this team found 3 pieces that were significant upgrades.
Right, exactly, Mark. And De'Ara King, I mean, if there was any other quarterback under center, I don't know how the season would turn out per se. I mean, N'Kosi Perry played very well against Oklahoma State. I'd be very curious to see how we play under N'Kosi Perry if he was our starting quarterback starting the season compared to De'Ara King, if it would be a similar record, better or worse. But De'Ara King, man, he's definitely been a huge factor in winning a lot of football games. Bordegadas as well, our kicker. I mean, I think he was a first-team All-American, so that says a lot. Quincy Roche, Jalen Phillips, 2 key defensive end players who they're going to get drafted in the NFL. Those are 2 NFL players you added to your roster. I just mentioned 4 guys from the transfer portal, Mark. So it's kind of like just Band-Aids, like you said, pieces to help out your team that year or maybe the next year. Here's a key stat, Mark. ACC went 0-6 in the bowl games. Miami's not playing in the hardest conference at all. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors. The 2 losses you had in the regular season against top 20 programs, UNC and Clemson, you got blown out and you were never in that football game. The rest of the games, listen, they won 4 straight games after the Clemson loss. Those were dogfights. Miami could have easily lost those games, but they won. all smoke and mirrors, Mark. Ultimately, you know, it's going to see. I mean, we're going to see a lot next year. It's a very easy division we're in the ACC Coastal. You can win a lot of football games, be consistently 8-3, 8-2. Look at Notre Dame, independent, how they did in the ACC this year. And once again, they got completely destroyed in the college football playoffs. Notre Dame is a perfect example of smoke and mirrors, going 11-1, 10-2 every year, and then losing at the end of the year against a marquee opponent. So Miami, ultimately, I think this year was a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Glad you made that statement about the ACC Coastal Division. Not a lot of people necessarily believe me when I lay it all out. It's plain to see year after year after year after year, there just doesn't exist in Miami's division a prominent program. And almost every division in college football has a prominent program, whether that's Ohio State or Georgia, Alabama, or multiple, or at least a Wisconsin, a tier of a Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Northwestern that's strong, maybe not an elite there, but very, very strong. It's full of Georgia Tech and Pitt and Duke and Virginia Tech, and North Carolina is the one that's emerging potentially as a top-notch team, but they have yet to prove that. They had a successful season. And again, that was the barometer game for me, Paul, and that was the big disappointment for me in evaluating Miami football. Because once the Clemson game was played and lost, about to the extent that I expected, okay, well, they're a top 3 team. I was looking at Miami as a top 15 to 20, 25 team, something in that range, and thinking, okay, I wanted to see a better effort, but we didn't get it. Okay. And then I'm looking at the rest of the games thinking, NC State, perfect smoke and mirrors example of what you just gave. 8-3 in the regular season, didn't play Clemson or Notre Dame. So that should be factored into their record of 8-3 in the regular season. They were the only team in the conference that missed the 2 best teams in the conference. And then they go play a 4-6 Kentucky team in the SEC and they lose a bowl game. So Miami's playing a bunch of teams underneath them week after week after week after week. Yep. It's Pitt, it's Virginia, it's Louisville, it's Virginia Tech, it's Duke. And they win all those games. 1 or 2 of them impressively, most of them not very impressively. I thought, okay, North Carolina, this is the game I want to see them step up. They're on their tier, top 15 to 20 team. And it was just a debacle.
Yeah.
And so then the Oklahoma State game was another opportunity against a like program. And it was a good ball game. And you could look at the personnel losses as being pretty even on both sides. They're missing one of the top 5 backs in the nation, Chuba Hubbard. Tylan Wallace is one of the top wide receivers in the country. He sat out the second half, but Miami was missing their 2 bookend defensive ends who are prominent players. So I would think that the personnel losses were fairly even, and they lost their starting quarterback and hung in the game. And as you mentioned, I think we should give props to N'Kosi Perry for stepping in. And certainly the stats didn't back up his performance because he suffered from a number of drops in that game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, N'Kosi Perry played tremendously in that football game. It's very unfortunate, our wide receivers, specifically Mark Pope D. Wings, did not step up in that football game, make some catches for him. If not, he would have thrown for easily over 300 passing yards in that football game. I think we would have won that game as well. Mark, by the way, De'Ara King, that tragic injury, tearing his ACL, wish him a speedy recovery moving forward. I don't wish that on anyone, man. I mean, just tragic. Your last game going into next year to get that injury. Best of luck moving forward. Get a healthy De'Ara King. You have Jalen Phillips and Quincy Roche. Let's say they play in that game. I think Miami wins that bowl game. I really do. What do you think about
that they would have put enough pressure on the quarterback to get the job done?
And so, I think Miami wins that game, with having their full roster. It's unfortunate we didn't. King got injured moving forward. But, even with N'Kosi Perry, we make some key plays. If our wide receivers catch the football, I think Miami still wins the game. But ultimately, it's tough to win a football game when you give up 37 points a game. It's very hard. And key stat for the whole season, Miami has given up an average of 70 yards in penalties. total yards resulting from penalties. We gave up 135 yards in penalties against Clemson. I mean, we're not very disciplined. Yeah, at times you always get the bad penalties, but overall, I mean, we definitely have resulted in making a lot of dumb penalties, and it's unfortunate, and I don't know, is that on coaching? I think it is.
We appreciate the super chat coming in from William Stanley. If he loves Miami, I believe he's referring to Manny Diaz as much as he says he does. He will make the tough move and make the change. Honestly, it's not that tough. I want to go back, Paul, to the North Carolina game, because what surprised me about that, besides the score, because I thought it was going to be a really good game. I was looking forward to that game more than any game of the day, is that North Carolina, here's a team with just prolific offensive weapons. So what I was expecting was a 35-31 game. If somebody would have said to me before the game started, it's going to be 62-26 North Carolina, I would have said, okay. Sam Howell threw for 6 touchdowns and 500 yards. He just went off against a secondary that had shown its issues throughout the season. He only had to throw the ball 19 times.
Yeah.
North Carolina their offensive line just beat the hell out of Miami's front, and those 2 running backs just threw guys around in the secondary. It was a physical beating that I didn't expect.
Yeah, North Carolina, the interesting thing is, Mac Brown took over that program the same time span as Manny Diaz took over the University of Miami program, with a lot lesser talent, with Larry Fedora literally going like 3-9 or 1-10. I mean, their starting quarterback under Larry Fedora ended up being their linebacker. That's development in the Mac Brown coaching staff. He's developing what he has at the table. And look, in a 2-year time span, he's playing against Texas A&M in the Orange Bowl. Manny Diaz, 2-year time span, we're losing Oklahoma State, and we're getting annihilated by the University of North Carolina. That's a national champion head coach in Mac Brown. Phil Longo, offensive coordinator. I don't know how long they can keep him there from getting a job in the SEC as an offensive coordinator or another school, but he deserves a ton of credit. And Sam Howell, man, as a quarterback, he's going to be one of the best in the nation, easily a Heisman candidate next season. Their 2-star running backs just put on a show. They were great coming into the game. It's very rare that a team has 2,000-yard rushers with less than 12 games in a season, Mark. That's a very good offense, one of the better offenses in the nation. And, hey, man, I tip my hat off to North Carolina, what Mac Brown is doing there. I think that is a program trending upwards, and look out for them to compete and win the ACC Coastal next year and compete against Clemson. I'm serious.
Chuck C., appreciate the super chat contribution. Want to remind everyone that you can catch Paul on Paul Scoop on the U right here on YouTube. So just go to the search bar if you're not familiar with Paul's work. We want you to check him out. Obviously, the insight, the knowledge, the passion is obvious right here. So we want you to check out Paul's YouTube channel, Paul Scoop on the U. Chuck C., thank you for the super chat. Caught the end of the last show, listening here a bit. Thanks, Mark. The man. Diff from 19 was, the main difference from 2019. King plus kicker plus improved offensive line play. Linebackers went backward. So, yeah, the offensive line seemed to be more at least competent this year. Not devastating in any way, but at least competent offensive line play most of the time. But people having big issues with the linebackers, Paul.
Yeah, and who's our inside linebackers coach? Who's our outside linebackers coach? That's Coach Packies. I believe he's our outside linebackers coach, and inside linebackers coach is Coach Baker. The writing is on the wall at the University of Miami. I mean, it's time to let go of your entire staff, Manny Diaz. If not, you will be let go next season. And I think ultimately Alabama will destroy Miami in the first game if we don't make the appropriate changes moving forward. And I believe there will be changes to the defensive staff. But I'm pretty curious if Manny Diaz will let go of his coaching tree. Coach Packy as well. He's a student of the Manny Diaz coaching tree. I'm sorry. It's time to get rid of these guys. If we want to get better as a program, we're going back. years if we don't improve. And UNC is a great model of what can change in 2 years with good coaching and a good coaching staff. And they are way past Miami next year as well. So it's very, very gloomy this offseason if Manny Diaz can make changes. And I'm very curious, and I don't know if he will. I really don't.
What else do you take from the bowl game besides what we discussed in regards to guys that stepped up, could be breakout players in 2021, continued areas of concern, the good and the bad?
We need a corner. We need a cornerback ASAP. Al Blades, I don't know if he'll be coming back next year. I believe he will. I know he had a heart condition. He had to sit out the rest of the year. DJ Ivy, Corey Couch has been a nice silver lining at the cornerback position. DJ Ivy, he's just an average ACC player. Let's be real. Moving forward, but you need guys. It's a very young group after the guys I named, Marcus Clark, Isaiah Dunson. We need to add a veteran corner presence there, someone preferably maybe from a Power 5 conference, a redshirt senior or a senior that is going to be eligible to play next year. Just the veteran presence we need. Wide receiver play as well needs to step up. We need a go-to receiver after Mike Harley who can catch the football, maybe a possession receiver, because we have no hands whatsoever in that wide receiver position group. Moving forward, Brevin Jordan, I really hope he returns. John Mackey Award finalist. Everyone who was on that press conference call spoke very highly of him. They all believe, a lot of NFL scouts believe he's probably the third best tight end right now in the nation. If he does declare to the NFL draft, he has a grade right now going in the 3rd round to the 5th round. Another name to look out for, Bubba Bolden. He plays safety at the University of Miami. I believe he was our leading tackler on the defensive side of the football. It'll be nice if he returns as well. Linebacker position, we need to start playing a veteran presence. We're done with the Zach McLeod presence. We're done with the Bradley Jennings presence as well at that position. We need a new culture there. We need new coaches, and it starts with your Avery Huffs, your Corey Flaggs, your Wayman Steeds. Get those guys in there. Get them more playing time moving forward. And another name I'm very excited about for next year is James Williams, what he can do. He's a 6'5", 220-pound safety. 5-star recruit. I'm very curious how he can make an impact day one against Alabama or just throughout the season. I mean, Alabama's a tough game in general, but hey, we'll see what happens next year. It's a big question mark for me because that non-conference schedule is it's fairly tough with, your quarterback rehabbing from a torn ACL. And what do you do at the starting quarterback position? That's a conversation the staff needs to have with N'Kosi Perry if he wants to return or get his shot at a Power 5 school starting the whole way. That's a conversation the staff needs to have with N'Kosi Perry or who they're going to start if N'Kosi Perry doesn't want to go to another program. So I don't know. Maybe D'Eriq King will be 100% ready by then. We'll see what happens. So a lot of big question marks moving forward. I'm glad. Last thing I'll say, Deandre Johnson, outside linebacker / defensive end. They'll use him as an edge rusher. He should be, an assist, helping us out moving forward, getting to the quarterback, providing a lot of pressure. I mean, 4.5 sacks in the SEC, kind of a little bit breakout year, 9th total in the SEC with that stat. Should be a breakout player in the ACC Coastal level because ACC Coastal is probably the weakest in the Power 5 level. 4.5 sacks in the SEC. He should have a good year.
Valdez and a few others, we appreciate you supporting and letting people know, James as well, to get the like button before you head on out. So please hit the like button and support Paul at Paul Scoop on the U, covering Miami football. It was mentioned in the chat as well. I don't know if you have any leans toward what has happened in the strength and conditioning end of this, whether that's a weakness or everything's fine. But there were a couple of comments concerning the strength and conditioning program not being what it should be.
I mean, I think it's fine. I don't see what the issue is. I'm more concerned with wide receivers catching the football, cornerback play improving, cornerback recruits actually landing them because we have 0 right now in our class. I'm not worried about strength and conditioning guys. I'm worried about defensive staff changes. Every year, these guys look like bodybuilders after they're working out under the strength and conditioning program with Coach Feely. When Coach Feely got hired, everybody and their mom was excited about Coach Feely. They were in love with him. Now people are complaining about him. Look, let's get guys who can catch the football, and let's get cornerback recruits, because right now we're striking out. We're batting literally under the Mendoza line. This is ridiculous. Okay, that is a concern. If you want to compete at the Power 5 level, how do you expect to compete if you have 0 cornerback commits right now? Don't give me the name Malik Curtis. I don't want to hear that. Okay, I want true corners that we're going to play at the next level. I don't know what's going to happen with Avonte Williams moving forward and his injury status. I don't. That's up in the air. So there's more things to concern about guys, how much they can bench press and squat and deadlift. There's a lot more things we can be worried about. And that starts with the defensive staff. And that's my number one issue before we can get started and talk about our strength and conditioning coach.
D. Hernandez, the administration at Miami has always gone the easier, cheaper route when hiring coaches. And none of the coaches in the last 20 years have been the answer for this reason. No more nice coaches.
Hey, Mark, do you know what Manny Diaz's contract is?
I don't.
5 years, $4 million. 5 years. How does someone, a first-year head coach, get a 5-year contract at a Power 5 school?
Yeah.
Miami, 5-time national champion. That's awful. That is awful, in my opinion. Why would you even offer that to a first-year head coach who was Temple's second option to be their head coach, and he was our first option? We didn't reach out to anyone else that I know of. Listen, Miami, if they want to compete with the big boys, we're a small private school with 10,000 undergrad, close to maybe 12,000 undergrad in Coral Gables. We got to open up the checkbook. We just had an alumni by the name of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He had $17 million he funded for the XFL. There is money at the University of Miami. We are part of a TV contract deal with the ACC. We make money out of Hard Rock Stadium. All those beverages, whatever tickets we sell, that's money going to UM after we pay our expenses to the Dolphins. There is money at the University of Miami. Now, is football the priority? No, it is not. It's the second priority. Number one priority is University of Miami Medical. Obviously, finding the cure of cancer is the most important thing over football, without a doubt. And I'll stand by that. I think everyone can agree. But the priority at Miami is the medical research department, and finding, the future cures for diseases that can, help out the world. Better place, become a better place. So, yeah,
it is kind of curious that Mark Richt steps down, and immediately, Manny Diaz has just been announced as the head coach at Temple hours early, like within 24 hours, 48 hours, something in that range, and they just did a beeline to Philadelphia to pick up Manny Diaz and get him to Miami with no national search.
Yeah, no, I mean, Blake James literally tweets out, we will do a national coaching search. We have a lot of names interested. There was even an article stating Rex Ryan, ex-players wanted Rex Ryan to be the head coach. Some people were pushing for Lane Kiffin. There was an article about him. Miami was interested. I don't think it was real. But I mean, there were so many coaching candidates we can talk about that Miami could have gone after, at least just inquire about. So many. Yet we just settle for a guy getting the Temple head coaching job. Okay? No. We already learned in the past. We hired Al Golden from Temple. Miami is not a first-year head coaching job. Okay? Miami is a job where you have a legit resume. Look, if you get a coordinator from the NFL to come on down, that's fine. But don't get a coordinator that's resume was 1 year at Texas, a couple years under Dan Mullen at Mississippi State, and then a good few years at Miami. Let him grow at Temple. And then when he starts winning football games, then you go out and hire him. But you don't go after Temple's second choice. You go after your first choice. And it shouldn't be Manny Diaz, but he's our head coach, so it is the pass.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in this chat, whether they're a Miami fan or not, that knows college football would consider Georgia Tech to be the job that Miami is. But what happened there? They hired Jeff Collins after he had a successful run at Temple.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, basically, I was kind of making some jokes in the group chat. I mean, Miami, we're basically like an NC State, we're nearing the top 25. We were in a shootout with NC State. We won 45-42. Obviously, I mean, that's where the program's at. I mean, it really is. We're not that good. We're a very receiving votes to maybe 20 to 25 program, if that. I wouldn't say 20. That's where Miami's at right now moving forward. And we got Alabama game 1, so we better be ready to go. If not, we will be embarrassed once again on national television.
Yeah, that ranking of 9 to 10 in the nation before the North Carolina game was, you've used the term a few times, smoke and mirrors.
Oh, my God.
It was one big game against Clemson in which the team wasn't ready for it. And then other than that, there was nothing to substantiate that kind of ranking because they were playing a lot of teams that were 40th to 50th in the country and getting by most of them. They looked impressive against Florida State. They looked impressive against Duke. They took care of those two opponents. The other ones were nail biters for the most part.
Yeah. Look, I mean, Mark, it's an easy fix. We saw this with LSU. They bring in Joe Brady as a co-offensive coordinator, just an offensive mind to help out their offense, and it worked tremendously. Look, make the right changes on the defensive staff. Bring in a defensive coordinator who knows what he's doing, and let's roll. Bring in ace recruiters as your position coaches, and let's go. You can recruit at Miami. Every single head coach at Miami has had a top 10 recruiting class. Randy Shannon, Al Golden, Mark Richt, Manny Diaz will have one as well. It's not hard to recruit at the University of Miami. That's not the problem. It's development, Mark. Get in good assistant coaches, and I think if you bring in a guy like Charlie Patridge from Pittsburgh as your co-defensive coordinator, he has a solid resume. I think that would help a lot. And you bring in cornerback coach, linebackers coach as well. Get rid of Packy. Bring in a guy like Kevin Patrick, let's say. Look, it can work. There's other cornerback coaches that we can get.
We appreciate everybody that's jumped on the live chat today. We know that this was a bit of a surprise. Blame me. Paul and I scheduled to get together. I was going to do it as a record, but hey, why not get all of you involved in the conversation? So we've been on the line for about 45 minutes talking to all of you, and we appreciate everybody that's jumped in the chat to provide your comments, your questions, your topics as well. And of course, everyone in the super chat, thank you so much for your contributions. We'll have to have Paul back. We've run out of time, but I will definitely, Paul, track you down. You know, you're welcome here anytime to talk Miami football.
Yeah, appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much again for giving me the opportunity to talk some Canes football. I greatly appreciate it. I'm a huge supporter of Mark Rogers TV. I mean, you're doing a tremendous job, over 23,000 subscribers. So it's an honor to be on this platform talking college football with you.
And again, folks, we got it right on the banner there. Paul, scoop on the U. There you've got it. Just type that into the search bar here on YouTube and check out his work. Always appreciate the insight and the knowledge, Paul. You have a great day, and we'll talk some Miami football soon.
You too, Mark. Take care.